Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast, where we discuss all things ranging from love, relationships, authenticity, fulfillment, to lessons from plant medicine journeys, inner healing, and living your truth. I'm not your teacher, I'm only your fellow student. Occasionally, you also get to hear some of my own healing process and journey back to love. The point of the program? That you take away at least one actionable piece of knowledge that supports you in expanding whatever aspect of your life your heart most desires. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I will be your host, and I am honored to have you here. Happy listening. Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast. I am so excited to be here with a very special guest. I laugh because I always say I'm here with a very special guest, but this guest is definitely special. She's got a very special place in my heart. She's my girlfriend, Ellanah Fawcett. Thank you for being here, Ellanah.
Thank you for inviting me.
How do you feel?
A little bit nervous. I've never done anything like this before.
Oh, it's your first interview.
Yes.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're going to be fine. This is the first of a 3-part series that we will do. And I'm excited to just have this opportunity to share who you are with the world. You're someone whom the very first time I met, immediately I just noticed love. You know, it's a beautiful thing. Just you move around the world and just watching you walk around, like there's just the way that you move that you carry like this beautiful love with you. And as I got to know you, at one point I remember I told myself one day, I definitely got to have her in the Love is Our Nature podcast. This was long before a relationship between us started. And just for the record, we are in Spain, Menorca, in your mother's house, this beautiful place in your old bedroom.
Yep.
Hence, if you're watching us on YouTube, all the beautiful pink. And
it's a feminine haven.
Yeah. And today is June 27th. So we've been in a relationship now for just over 7 months. It's been a beautiful journey. So I didn't get you to write a biography or a proper introduction since we're going to keep it pretty casual. So instead, why don't you tell people a little bit about who you are?
Okay, that's quite a big question.
Oh, we have a lot of time.
There's lots of different dimensions to that. So Cesar shared my name. My name is Ellanah, and I'm blessed to live with this amazing man in Costa Rica. Though, as he shared, we're traveling at the moment. And my journey over the years has led me to be someone who shares a lot of different modalities of breathwork and Reiki and yoga, and it's kind of exploring how we can come deeper home to ourselves through movement, through, the intelligence and magic of our own body, both this kind of like physical body as well as our more subtle bodies, just discovering who we are. And so I guess who I am is someone who's very curious about that, about the depth of who we are as humans and what it really means to be human beyond what we've been told and what we're kind of expected to experience through our bodies.
I see. Okay. Well, that's a nice little nutshell. She's very modest, by the way. I know we could go on and on just talking about like everything that you've done as well. You're also a yoga teacher for how long now?
It's been 8 years now.
8 years, and you're also a Reiki master?
Yes.
Is that what you call someone who does attunements?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to get your Reiki on, what do you call someone once they've been attuned? They become a what?
A Reiki practitioner.
A Reiki practitioner. Right. So Ellanah can train you to be a Reiki practitioner. I've heard amazing things from people that have taken her Reiki training. And what else is in your curriculum?
My curriculum? Breath work. So rebirthing breath work. That's something that has been a huge part of my own journey in my life, and that I love sharing. Especially, I was doing a lot of these women-only breathwork circles, so combining women's circles with breathwork in Costa Rica. And that was very powerful to have very intimate and kind of safe spaces for the feminine to go into emotionality and sharing and intimacy with self as well as with others.
Yes, and breathwork is such a big topic. It's something I've developed a lot of respect for. And episode 4 of the Love is Our Nature podcast was all about breathwork. We interviewed a breathwork practitioner who did biodynamic trauma release breathwork, and I shared my experience in that, which was highly transformative. And what you do is rebirthing breathwork, which is somewhat similar. Why is it called rebirthing?
Rebirthing. I feel like there's 2 different reasons why. First is because you rebirth through it. Like a lot of the time, it's like these old layers of self are integrated at a much deeper level, and you can often come out feeling reborn. But it was specifically called rebirthing because that strand in and of itself was first kind of really brought into being combined with exploring birth trauma and how kind of the traumatic experiences of our birth create who we are later on in life. And so Leonard Orr was exploring this and how through the breath you could actually go back to your own birth and relive it and integrate. Because as we kind of know, the birthing system's gone a little bit crazy in the last couple of decades. And so a lot of what I'm actually very intrigued around is bringing back to life the sacredness of birth, like sacred practices, whether you're in a hospital or at home. You can still create a sacred birth rather than kind of a lot of disconnection that happens where we're kind of tugged out, then immediately disconnected from mother and father, slapped around a bit, cord cut straight away, put onto the mama who might have had lots of things pumped into her which go into baby. And as humans, we're built to alchemize experiences, but if we're not given the spaces to alchemize them, to move those things through, they stay with us. And they create kind of patterns that aren't necessarily for our highest good and our highest kind of abundance in the world. So the rebirthing can help us go all the way back to then, all the way back to even conception and time in the womb, to rebirth ourselves into the world as someone who has integrated those experiences and who is back in flow, and where every cell is then breathing with the universe rather than holding on to kind of stagnation in parts of the body where we're not fully alive. So that's kind of a little nutshell.
How did that become a concern of yours? How did it become important for you, the whole thing around the impact of birth in people's lives right now and bringing back sacred birth?
It's a good question. Well, my own birth was quite intense. And actually, interestingly, anytime I go for an astrology session, they're always like, oh, your birth. And I'm like, yes. And I think as I got older, I became more aware of the impact of that. And originally when I started breath work, it wasn't to do with that. And actually it was a lot of, alchemizing other aspects of self and exploring, and also having incredible mystical union experiences and all of these amazing things of where the breath can take us. And then I did a training with an amazing couple in Costa Rica called Mario and Sophie. And that's where we really dived into the connection with your birth itself. And we had to ask our parents all these questions, and we were suddenly kind of connected with how all these different things that can happen to us in birth, what patterns that can lead to in your life. And so I started to see a lot of patterns in my own life, and some of my deepest kind of ways of being that I hadn't necessarily illuminated myself. And I've been kind of practicing yoga and meditating for years, which in some ways it actually supported continuing to live within these patterns I wasn't aware of. And then the breath suddenly shook everything up, made me aware of, some of my own birthing patterns that I was living.
So that's when you saw the impact of that your birth can have in your own life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because my whole life I never really heard anybody talk about that. Like, I thought when a woman gives birth, like, well, all we need to make sure happens is that the baby comes out healthy, right? And whether you have to cut her open, give her something for the pain, like an epidural, or like, and the baby, like, just make sure he or she is healthy, smack him around a bit, clean him up, wash him, spray him down. and yeah, you've really illuminated for me, like, the depth of the subconscious around that, right? Like those imprints that can happen in the very first moments of life when we take those first few breaths.
And it's amazing, because if we're aware of that as parents too, it's like I remember the first time I really actually first became more and more aware of that was a friend of mine was pregnant years ago, and she was also a sound healer. And she decided after her baby she was going to start doing sound healing specifically for babies after birth to help them integrate the trauma of birth. I'd never really thought about that before. I was like, wow, it's so interesting. And there's so many things now you can do, like craniosacral, baby massage, energy healing, like all these beautiful things to just help these little beings fully come into their bodies on the earth plane after they've been squished through this magical tunnel that kind of is probably a little bit of a journey after being floating in bliss for 9 months.
Yeah. Hopefully.
To then come into extreme sensation.
Right.
It is interesting. So all of these things are powerful.
And there's a lot of literature out there now that's been written right around this subject and the importance of it, like the birthing experience.
I think so. I'm not very well read on it.
Okay.
But I know there's a lot of amazing books that you can probably find.
Cool. Do you mind sharing some of those patterns that you said you started to notice in yourself, that through yoga and other things you were doing, you weren't quite seeing them or having access to transforming them, but breath work gave you the access to it? What were some of those patterns?
I think one of the biggest ones for me personally was really embracing like my primal energy. So part of my birth was that I got helped out. My mom kind of felt like she couldn't push anymore, but also she'd been really, she had a fracture in her spine, so she couldn't move for like the last part of the pregnancy. So she was in a lot of pain. And she also had the epidural. So a lot of babies who have the epidural, they tend to then later on can be a little bit spaced out. They've come into the world a bit spaced out. But I've forgotten the name of this now, oh my gosh. But basically a lot of times if a mama was going through a lot of pain, like before the birth or was very sick, babies can come out, and humans later on in life can kind of carry a little bit of survival guilt or like guilt of being. So for me, I definitely then noticed that. Mario pointed it out to me, and I was like, whoa. He was like, look, there's like mosquitoes, and you don't even touch them. Like you don't even like, you'd feel bad if you killed an ant or anything like that. And I believe that that's also, I'm very pleased with that too. Like, I think it's important to move with gentleness in this world, like to be aware of life and death and the sacredness of life and the huge impact it is to take a life, no matter how small it is. But what he was also pointing out was this fear of fully embodying this kind of inner fire, that it's kind of like about becoming very overly gentle and just like disconnecting from that raw source of power, which a lot of the meditation and yoga I'd done was also doing that. It was like very transcendental, like just like merge into the bliss of being, which is incredible. But I hadn't realized how it wasn't really giving me that wholeness, or like taking me to a deeper wholeness. It was not heaven and earth combined, it was heaven. So I think that was one of the biggest ones that he pointed out for me. And I noticed after he pointed that out, things began to really rapidly shift in my life. And in the breath, we would see that as someone who doesn't take a full inhale, who it's actually very hard for them to like breathe fully. So if we think about that, breath kind of fans the flames. So if you're not breathing in fully, your fire is going to stay very small. So I started breathing more fully, and then life actually, I mean, it got faster, which was interesting. And that's also a way that we can control things too. So it's like a very subtle form of control is like keeping the fire small. Just like keep the fire small, then everything is easy and nice and happy, and it doesn't burn anything. It's just like, but
and then you don't really perhaps live up to the potential that's in you. Is that somewhere along those lines?
Yeah.
Would you say most people don't breathe fully?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because you can have two aspects of not breathing fully or not breathing in harmony.
Okay.
So you can have people who don't really breathe a full breath, and you can also have people who really force it, and they take huge amount because they feel like they have to be strong and like hold everything together and like be these powerful forces in the world and really just like push themselves and rah! But it's also trying to control. It's not relaxing into the current. It's like in some ways like purposely trying to swim against the current just to feel that power. So it's very fascinating how like there's just this wisdom, like we can just listen to our breath in a day and notice what patterns we're living, who we are. And I feel like it's kind of, what's that saying? I've forgotten the saying, but it's like you can look into everything and discover the universe. So kind of choose one thing and you'll discover your own inner universe. Whether that's like the breath or some other aspect of self. But
so just by looking at your breathing pattern, you can probably discover all kinds of ontological things about you. Ontological meaning some of your ways of being, or maybe some inauthenticities or shadows or things like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And just really how you are, which I guess is the same thing, like how you're dancing with life. Like, how am I in dance with life today? Like if the breath is life, how am I relating with life?
Nice. Great. Well, let's take a step back from breath work and go a bit more personal towards you for a moment. You haven't lived like a very conventional life from what I've gathered. I mean, I grew up in Western culture. You go to school, you go to college, you get a degree, and you get a job. Can you tell us a little bit about your story around that? Like what was the journey towards the beginning in your schooling, upbringing, and how did it begin to shift? What were some factors there?
For sure. So I know from the outside, my young life looked very conventional. Like you could see kind of like a suburban family in London, going to like a nice school. But then kind of underneath it, I had a mom who was reading my tea leaves every week in the morning, speaking to angels, like doing guided meditations together. And I remember as like a very young teenager reading a book on astral travel. I had my first out-of-body experience when I was pretty young. I think I must have been like 7 or 8 in the ocean. So I always grew up knowing that there was something else, or there was more. And I guess all children know that, but somehow it didn't leave me. Like it stayed there. And I remember one of my teenage experiences was also like seeing a light body. Like I remember one night I just knew that there was so much more, and I put my hand out and I invited the universe to show me, just to reveal itself. And I saw this hand made of white light come and take my hand.
You saw a light body?
Yeah. And I don't know whose it was.
So it was kind of like a body, like a human body?
It was an arm made of light.
Oh, okay.
Made of white light.
It was just hanging out there?
They just appeared and took my hand.
In the middle of the night, or like
in the
at
middle
lunch?
Of the night.
In the middle of the night?
Yeah.
You were by yourself?
I was by myself.
How come these things don't happen to most people?
I don't know. I think that we all have the potential within us. It's just whether we are open to believe and have faith and trust in an unknown.
Yeah.
Or whether our mind has worked life out and is saying to the universe, prove it to me. And I think the universe, if you come with that attitude of kind of like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but prove it to me, it doesn't reveal those things. It's kind of, but I definitely think growing up with my mom was was like a big part of it. And even my dad, who's like very, like, call my mom a witch and things like that, but he's really sensitive. Like he's very sensitive and always had this deep sense of peace around him. Like I remember that as a child, just always feeling this like meditative peace almost, even though he didn't meditate. He does yoga now, but he didn't do it back then. He loves his yoga now. It's really cute. But yes, I always had this awareness of something more, and that there's, I don't know.
How old were you when you saw this light arm?
Can't remember the exact day. It was a young teenager though.
Okay, young teens.
I remember which bedroom I was in and which house.
Okay.
But I'm not sure of the exact age.
So was that something that kind of opened your mind to like, whoa, there's more out there than what we usually see in the material world, or was there more things that happened after that?
There's been lots of things later on in life, but I think it was kind of after that, really being a teenager in London took over. So those kinds of things weren't as fascinating to me anymore.
These, I don't know, should I call them supernatural?
I don't even know what you would call them.
These mystical things.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said mystical. Those things weren't that important to you anymore.
No, I mean, like, things would still happen, but like then I was a teenager in London having a great time. And other things took over in terms of like what was important to me.
Yeah.
But those younger experiences definitely stayed with me. And yeah, if I look back, it kind of makes sense how I walked the path that I ended up walking.
I see. You told me that one of the things that had a big impact on you, I don't know if I remember properly, you even might have gone as far as saying that it was like your greatest medicine was 5 rhythms.
Oh yeah.
Can you say when it was that you experienced it, and what is 5 rhythms and what it provided you?
For sure. So again, a little bit of context, I guess. I first went and solo traveling at 18 with one of my best friends at the time, Charlotte, to India, and then with my boyfriend at the time through Thailand and Indonesia and Cambodia. And I'd been struggling in London before that, and had started to get a little bit depressed, actually. Just feeling stuck and not really.
After having traveled, then you came back to London and you felt depressed.
Before and after. Before it was because I didn't really realize, I didn't really know why. Then I went away and I was like, wow, it's because there's this whole other world where I know that there's more, and what we're being told in this London box isn't everything, that there's far more to life. When I got back, then I also got a bit depressed again. I was like, okay, like I'm back in the grey, everything's very neat, I'm on the train, no one's coming around with chai, and like everything's very orderly and just like structured, and where's the creativity? And I had to refine that, like to realize creativity. And part of that was then I got back and I started looking for like things, places essentially where I could meet new people who shared a kind of, I don't know, like vision of something more in life. And so I started going to different dances, and it was about, I guess actually it was a little bit longer than it was about 2 years later, I stopped drinking completely. So I was no longer interested in going to clubs, and conscious dancing really was like this huge piece for me. And I started discovering more and more conscious dances, which were just...
How old were you?
How old was I? I'm really bad at timelines.
2 years
after I came back. So I must have been 21, 20. Maybe it was my 21st birthday was the last time I drank. And yeah, and then I discovered Five Rhythms as one of those dances that people were going to discover more about life and themselves rather than to get high, and which is also beautiful. I mean, we can access greater dimensions of ourselves in so many ways, but I really wanted this kind of experience, and I completely fell in love with Five Rhythms. And for me, it was, I'm quite an unstructured person, so I love the structure that every week it's the same 5 rhythms, and you look in the mirror and you discover yourself in each rhythm. And
so it's like a dance journey through 5 different rhythms.
Yes.
And do you remember what those 5 rhythms are?
Yes. It's flow, and then staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness. And basically says that those are the foundational rhythms of life, that everything moves through them. But it was really...
So what did that provide you, going to those dances and taking those journeys?
Many things.
And these were sober journeys?
Yeah, completely sober. And yeah, well, gosh, it really shared with me a lot, because a lot of it is about your relationship with yourself. So you discover yourself through the rhythms, which rhythms come easy to you, which don't, how that shifts week to week, where you have resistance, where you have excitement, and then relation to other, because some of the times you're guided to dance with other people. So you begin to discover your patterns in relation to others too. Like, how do I meet another? Or do I have resistance to meeting another? Or I don't feel like actually opening to someone today. Do I honor that boundary or do I not? And all of these different things that begin to come into play. And yeah, so for me, I guess you could say in some ways I had struggled to connect with being human. I think that was a lot of my younger years, was like coming into the body. Yeah, it really kind of gave me this foundation of exciting and inspiring exploration into what it means to be human, what it means to live through a body, and how amazing that is, and how unique my own body is, and how exciting it is to dance with other bodies and other hearts and other minds. And that space is alive, like the space that holds us is alive. So as you're dancing, you're always dancing with something, someone. It's that our whole life is a dance. Like every movement, I'm moving with space. It's
beautiful.
Yeah.
I see. And speaking of medicine, I've been big on plant medicine, and certain points in my life is that you've been in ayahuasca ceremonies before?
I've sat once.
When was that?
Must have been 5 years ago, 5 or 6. 5.
Okay.
Yes.
What was your experience?
It was beautiful. Actually, it was a really beautiful ceremony. It was all women. With this woman I'd had a deep connection with the year before over a scorpion sting. And there was a pregnant mama as part of our group. She must have been about 7 months.
That was a 7-month pregnant woman that did ayahuasca?
Yeah.
Brave woman.
Yeah. But she'd done it many times.
Wow.
So it was nice. So we did a beautiful ceremony for her where we each wrapped some string around a sage with prayers for her and then gave it to her. It was a very magical experience. I mean, I took my first cup and then I was gone. I felt a whoosh in my body and I left and was in another dimension, being given information about my life and the world. But for me, at the time, I was very deeply into meditation. So I meditated every day for long periods of time, went on silent retreats. And meditation was really like my pathway, you could say. It was my medicine. Mm-hmm. And that was actually what the ayahuasca shared with me as well. Towards the end, she was like, this is beautiful. And you know within yourself that you won't meet with me many times in this life, that I am not your path, but I'm here. And that meditation is your path. And so trust in that and stay with it. And if I call to you again, you'll feel me. So that was the last time, and I haven't sat with her since then.
She hasn't called to you again?
No, she's whispered a few times. I think especially in Costa Rica where she's so present. And I feel in the next few years I probably will sit again. But I think definitely for me it's like rarer. Yeah. It's a much rarer occasion.
Yeah. Maybe one day we'll sit together.
Oh, that would be so nice. Oh,
yeah.
I would love that.
Me too. So many different things or routes that we can go here. You spoke about travel a bit. I think we kind of just went right over that. You started traveling the world when you were 18 years old. You kind of took off and started gypsying, more or less, no?
Kind of. Yeah, you could say it. But it's quite normal in the UK.
Okay. Oh, people have a gap year, apparently. We don't know about that in the West.
Yeah. So yeah, I have my gap year, which changed everything and probably ruined me for my university career. I did get a degree.
Your gap year was right after high school?
Yeah.
Okay. That's when you took your gap year before going to college.
Yeah.
And what do you mean it ruined everything?
Well, because then I got back and I was like, what am I doing? And I was studying anthropology at like a top university in London at LSE. So it was super high pressure and everyone there were amazing people, but really like dedicated to kind of this path and getting the top jobs and things. Apart from maybe in my department, there were more kind of slightly off beat, funky individuals who I loved so much. But yeah, I realized by the end of my degree, so I also left, I dropped out and went to drama school for a year and then got injured and couldn't work, couldn't do anything. So I was like, okay, I'll go back and finish my degree. But pretty much throughout university, I was traveling in all my holidays. So I was very blessed to get grants from the government, which were meant to go towards living. And a lot of the time they went towards exploring, along with my student loan. So I would just save and save and save and save and save. And then I would go away and in the holidays when I could. And in my penultimate year of university was when I took my yoga teacher training and then I got offered work straight away. So I went back out at Christmas that year to manage the studio while everyone else was away and run it basically and teach all the classes. And then after that, I got offered like my dream job, which was to be facilitating on retreats with this amazing woman called Francie Fishman.
Where?
In Thailand, on Koh Phangan, a small little island. It was very magical. And I remember sitting on a Thai beach when I was like 19 years old on my first travel, being like, wow, one day I would love to live here. And then fast forward a few years, that's exactly what happened. And I remember the first time my feet touched the sand. So I was on this boat. You had to get a boat to the island, then a little boat on the island to get to the bay, which is like this most magical bay. And it's actually where the man who wrote The Beach, he spent 3 months there, and after that he wrote the book, and it definitely
That's the
has
movie
that
with
feel.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah. So it
And
has
after
that
what?
feel. He wrote the book after being there. But
Nice.
yeah, the first time my feet touched the sand, I was like, wow, I'm home. And then this amazing man who turned into my friend later, called Abria, came up to me. I didn't know him at the time. He gave me the biggest hug, and he was like, welcome home.
Some stranger.
Yes.
And
But
that
he's
wasn't
not a
weird for you.
stranger. No, not at all. I would walk barefoot sometimes around London, and I was already,
You're already full hippie.
yeah.
Okay, so that was everyday normal business as usual. And it was like, wow, I'm home.
Yeah, and I felt I was home.
How long did you go on to live there?
I think it was something like 4.5 years. And I worked seasonally, so I would work for a couple of months, and then I would have a few months off where I would travel. So I went back to India, went to Cambodia. I spent a lot of time in Indonesia. Always going back to that magical place.
That being Thailand? Okay.
Or the little island, because I also traveled up north. I went to Guatemala as well, so I kind of travel. I would always travel with the intention of learning more, of kind of exploring more of this world, of who we are. And that was my intention originally of doing an anthropology degree, was who are we as humans? What makes us who we are?
Did you ever find the answer to that question?
No.
You
Well, I
haven't.
think we experience it in many ways. That's a very big question. That's like the meaning of life, no?
Perhaps.
But I think it's just experiencing many different facets of being human, and then discovering how we can best kind of serve on this earth. Then once we've explored more of who we are, and how can we embody more of who we are, that's also in service to something greater.
I see. What would you say you're most passionate about?
Wow. Many things. I
No,
normally
one only.
I know, I struggle to get specific.
She always does that. She wants to include like 4 or 5 things.
Specificity is hard for me.
Well, I'm just kidding. It could be several, but maybe they are intertwined.
What am I most passionate about? I feel like in the world, it's coming home to really heart-centered living.
Sorry.
You
I was
bet.
going to say, that you also did say it towards the beginning, that one of the things that you got passionate about in work was supporting people and coming home to themselves. Is that kind of what you mean by coming home to heart-centered living?
Yeah, because I believe, if we center ourselves, if we soften into our heart space and kind of, I don't know, like unlock this key to our soul. I don't know, it's all hard to put into words a lot of the time, but
it is. It's an interesting phenomenon, that whole thing about connecting with the heart and it being the portal to connecting with our soul. And a year and a half ago, had you asked me anything about that, I would have just looked at you like a deer in the headlights. But yeah, I think, you'd have to listen to season 1 of the Loves of Nature podcast to kind of hear all about that journey for me.
You have a beautiful heart.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Thank
But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. So say more about this great passion of yours, about connecting to the heart and finding home there.
I feel like when we do that, we start to strip away all of these veils and layers and like distorted lenses that we see through. So I guess I could say from that too, that's something that is really big for me and that has always been huge for me without even realizing, is like, as individuals, seeing like the souls of others, if that makes sense. So kind of like striving to really see the beauty in life. And that doesn't mean like in a bypassing way, kind of like, la la la, everything is magic. But just like seeing with the eyes of the heart, seeing another in all of their dimensions through your heart, seeing life through your heart. And I think that's like, it's hard to then speak about that in words because it's an experience that we can just have or kind of devote ourselves to moving closer to. And I guess that is what's kind of at the heart of most of what I share. It's like all these different modalities that support one another, but it's always about that, like coming back to.
Did you have an experience? I'm guessing the answer to this question is yes, but maybe I just want to hear more about it. Did you have an experience of coming home to yourself, connecting with your heart and finding home there, and like a parent before and after?
I feel like because I feel like there have been lots of like experiences, like we can have mystical experiences, and you're just floating in an ocean of love and seeing others in love, but I feel like really what we're speaking about is a process that's like naturally chiseling away at a rock over time to reveal what's inside. And so I feel like the true essence of that is something that very subtly just happens. It's like a thread that gets pulled and slowly, like covering, disappears. But I would say definitely one of the biggest catalysts for me was my move to Thailand. And that island and the community that I lived with there was a huge teacher for me. And a huge womb as well for me. I felt like I gestated there, and I gestated home to my heart. And I remember May, who was like my Thai mama. She's like the Thai mama to pretty much everyone there. She was this amazing massage therapist who was so much more. And she told me towards the end of my time there, she was like, well, honey, she calls everyone honey. This is where you come to learn to love. And then you take that love back into the world. And I really feel like that place was that for me. And there were, so many different experiences, but really it was the whole journey. It was every person that I met. It was the nature there that just reminded me of the simplicity of being and the beauty of being. I actually did have a very profound experience once that was very simple. Like I was just walking over the headland. There are 3 beaches, and I was walking from the furthest one to the middle one. So you go up over this hill and down, and I was all by myself. And I got to the top, and I was about to come back down into what was like the butterfly tunnel. And there was like this pervading silence in the air, even though there were like the sounds of nature, but this like the field of silence was strong. And suddenly this leaf just dropped from the tree, and it spiraled, and it just like spiraled all the way down to the earth, and I heard its moment of impact on the earth. And tears just welled up in my eyes, and it was like this incredibly profound experience of, I don't know, just witnessing the beauty of life in that single leaf. That it was like this single leaf just falling from the tree, which happens all the time, all around us, was suddenly the most beautiful thing that I'd experienced. And it was like, well, this is happening all the time. And that was a very heart-opening moment. And I think, I don't know, but I think that a lot of seeing life through the eyes of the heart is about remembering that.
Remembering what?
That life is beautiful. That it's like, it's a miracle and it's magical, and that there's breathtaking beauty all the time if we just stop, pause, breathe, and feel.
Do you think nature has something to do with that process?
Definitely.
How so?
Well, nature is just wild and magic, and she just is. Like she's in harmony with herself. We've lost harmony with ourselves as nature. And that means in some way we've lost harmony with our heart, because our heart is this large part of ourself. And like, even if you look at the color, I think we're looking at the window now, at the beautiful trees outside, and they're all green. And like, green is the color of the heart chakra. And I mean, I don't really know. I just know what I've experienced, which is that nature has been one of the biggest guides for me home to my heart. And like I said, it's not that like overjoy heart that's kind of like amped up and like in excess in a way. In overdrive, it's that heart that rests in the simplicity of being, that's then gets opened so wide that life is just a miracle. And then we move from that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it's very intriguing how I've spoken to different people about pivotal moments in their lives and in their personal growth journey, or you might call it their spiritual journey, and even myself included in it. And every one of us seems to have this profound moment of just like noticing something in nature, something that's quite commonplace, like you said, that happens every day, but all of a sudden just being there in that moment, feeling blown away, overtaken by the beauty that we're witnessing, and something just really connecting in the heart that we're moved to tears. I remember that happened to me in Potrero, and the very first week I went and watched the sunset, and I got in the ocean, which was beautiful, that you've now seen because I took you there for Valentine's Day. And it's a very calm ocean, as you remember, and it was like the first sunset I saw there. Might have been the day I arrived, and there was barely anybody at the beach, and I was just there in the calm ocean watching the sunset, and it was so beautiful, and like felt like I was dancing with the water as the waves gently came in and out, and I just started crying. Not like ugly crying, but like my eyes got teary, and I remember also thinking like, what's happening to me? Why am I crying? But at the same time, just letting whatever was moving through me be felt, and it opened the door to maybe everything that transpired after that. Interesting journey that also led me to you. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would love to tell people about you and who you are, or something that you're passionate about?
Let me think. What wants to come through? I guess we haven't spoken about music at all.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I guess like something that's very important to me is music, is song and voice. And yeah, I was scared of singing for years. And in Thailand, France used to run weekly song circles as part of our retreat. She'd always like, Ellanah, you're going to share a song? Nope. And then somehow in Costa Rica, I ended up sharing women's song circles with a beautiful sister Yasmin called Voices of the Moon. And then we did a wild women's like nature and voice retreat. And then with my beautiful other sister Annabelle, we started running kirtans, which were...
Those were fun.
Yeah, which were really, really special at our nature home. And we kind of came to that idea because both of us are very into mantra. So mantra practice has been huge for me for years, and I would always sing to myself on the guitar, and then I got a shruti, and even just doing japa. And
what's japa?
It's like where you have your mala and you do same mantra on each little rudraksha bead. But yeah, and there's something for me in the power of singing together. So I'm definitely not a performer, and I actually hate performing. Even though I did performing arts for years, I hate singing for people, but I love singing with people, and I love just the power that gets unleashed and like how that can be a powerful channel home to our hearts as well. And that's kind of at the heart of bhakti, is like coming back to devotion, coming back to being in loving connection with life, like giving all that you are to all that is in each moment, and discovering that you're infinite. And so yeah, that's I guess something else I'm really passionate about.
And you are a beautiful singer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's really nice. Before we wrap up, is there something you'd like to share about what you're creating next for you and your work? I know you've run beautiful women's retreats in the past. There's an upcoming retreat in Europe here, actually, in the UK.
Which you're going to run an amazing circle as
part of.
I
have the privilege of being in the facilitator team there. That's going to be really cool. Is there anything else or more details that you want to give about that, or anything else that you're creating next around offerings and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So the retreat is in the UK at the beginning of August. At Annabelle's family home in Hereford, and it'll be a long weekend of bhakti with kirtan, yoga practice, amazing conscious communication and connection circles, and yeah, it's also going to be quite kind of like back to simplicity. Like there's the option to camp if you want. We're also going to be running a kirtan in London on the bank holiday weekend on August 1st, I believe it is, the Monday evening in Hampstead Heath. So if you're in London, come and connect with us that day. And other than that, this year's been a bit of a transformation year. So a lot of my work kind of has gone into the chrysalis and is reforming. I have a few more Reiki trainings this year in Spain where we are, the UK, and then perhaps one or two more in Costa Rica before the end of the year, as well as one more kind of online breathwork course that's reforming itself from the last one that I did. So yeah. Do
you do one-on-one breathwork with people?
I do.
Online?
I do it online with people and in person.
Oh, cool.
So you can contact me if that's something you want to explore deeper.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Via Instagram is probably the best way.
Okay. And what is it?
Ellanah Marina Hope, with little full stops between each one.
Meaning a dot.
Yeah.
Ellanah Marina Hope.
You don't call them full stops?
No, we don't call them full stops.
Oh, wow.
We'll have to do a whole episode about differences between UK culture and language and American culture and language.
Aluminium.
We spent probably 15
Basil.
minutes last time arguing about proper table manners. She was trying to have me commit blasphemy and how I held my fork. Anyway, we found out it's just different etiquette. Both of us were correct for our cultures. But I'll tag your Instagram. I'll link your Instagram in the show notes so that people can follow you and check out your offerings, or maybe book a breathwork session. You're an incredible breathwork facilitator. I still remember the one that we did at Zunia. And my friend Daniel was just blown away by it as well. He's like, it's been months and he's like still always thinking back to it and reflecting on how beautiful it was. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Just thank you for having me. Thank you for listening as well to this conversation and journey.
You're welcome. And like I said, this is part 1, episode 1 of a 3-part series. This was an opportunity to really get to know Ellanah and her beautiful heart, how amazing she is. Maybe you see a bit of what I see in her now. and yeah, episode 2, we'll get to talk all about how this came about. This relationship and a beautiful story around that. And more importantly, what were the individual processes or journeys within ourselves that had us even be ready for a connection as beautiful as what we get to experience together. So stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in to the Love is Our Nature podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the blog and whatever else you use, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for being here. I love you. That is all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for being a valued listener. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the podcast in whatever your favorite platform is. You can also watch the video version of the episode on the Love is Our Nature YouTube channel. Check out loveisOurNature.com as well. That's where you can see our latest news and most recent content. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, share it with your friends, or email me. I love hearing what you took away for yourself out of listening. My email is Caesar@loveIsOurNature.com. That's CESAR, or Cesar, like my mother says it, at loveIsOurNature.com altogether. Till next time, I'll be here rooting for you. And remember, whatever the question, love is the answer.